Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 12th round of action at the Tata Steel Chess Tournament. For everybody in this event, this is the penultimate round, except for Magnus Carlsen. It's the final round for Magnus because he is playing against Daniil Dubov in round 13, who will not be showing up for his game because he unfortunately tested positive for the coronavirus. Magnus's opponent today is Fabiano Caruana. He was the last person to play against Magnus in the World Championship before Jan Nepomniachtchi, and he was once considered the man to beat Magnus. He was 3 points away from him in Classical, and he was going to be the guy. So we'll see if today that prophecy can come true. I hope you're all having a wonderful Saturday or whenever you're watching this recap. It's snowing in New York, and yeah, I mean, anytime it snows a lot or rains a lot in New York, it seems like the entire city basically shuts down. We all pay a lot of taxes here, but I don't know. Doesn't seem like our infrastructure tends to hold up. Not an excuse for some of you to get political. Anytime I complain about New York, y'all get political. I mean, you're more than welcome to get political in the comments. It's because it's a blue city. If that's what makes you happy, go ahead, be political. Make sure to get into a really heated debate in the comments. The more comments, the better. So, Fabiano Caruana versus Magnus Carlsen will start us off, and we have the move e4. A lot of fun today, a lot of good games. c5, and we have a Rossolimo. So a Rossolimo is something that we saw a lot. In fact, Magnus played this a lot against Fabiano back in their World Championship match, and it's just a feel-good moment. You know, we got these two brawlers going back and forth, and g6. G6 is the main line. Now, the Rossolimo is just simply one of the most complex openings that exist. Sometimes white will take on c6, black can take with the b or the d pawn, leading to extremely fluid structural battles with 3 in the middle and 1 on the side, or a clump of 4 like this. And I mean, it really just is absolutely fascinating. But Fabiano chooses actually to fake out the bishop and the knight here. He doesn't take it. He just leaves the bishop out there, which is a completely legitimate way to play as well. The point is that black tries to go for a main line and has committed to some sort of development scheme, but white is just going to focus on developing moves. So white is sort of forcing black into the fianchetto, black is hoping that white will take on c6. White chooses not to take on c6 whatsoever, and just play like this to support the center, and then build with d4. And that's exactly what we get. We have d4 and d5. And the pawn structure already, as early as move 7, is going to be very much like we're going to have to commit to something. And prior to us moving on, I should have done this before we actually started the video, but I'm actually going to take a very quick look into the database to see if there's any games. I don't believe there's a lot of games here. There are, yeah, I mean, compared to the main lines, there's definitely not that many. And by move 11 or 12 in this game, we're really going to be off the deep path. So beaten path, deep path. What the hell is it? What? Knight e4, bishop e3, takes, and queen b6. So let's just take a very brief moment to assess what the damage is. So both sides have traded a c-pawn into one another, right? Both sides traded a c-pawn, which means that everything is the same. A, B, D through H, but no c-pawn. White has a wedge in the middle, playing against the fianchettoed bishop. In general, this is very nice for white. This is supposed to be good for white, because the only way to break that bishop out is to play f6, and then potentially you're destabilizing the light squares in the center, and it's white who can try to prove some sort of advantage. But, okay, I mean, that's obviously not the end of the story, right? So, queen to e2 here by Fabiano has, it's like maybe 10 games ever played now. The point is you simultaneously defend b5 and b2, and then you build your little triangle here. Yeah, Magnus will try to pressure the center with the knight. He's also going to try to pressure the center maybe with the bishop on g4, or he'll just develop it naturally to f5, or he'll develop it very naturally to d7 and just connect his rooks and try to bring something to the c-file. The thing about locked structures is that the pieces gain in value, right? You're going to have to do something with your pieces in a locked situation, because the person with the pawn breaks will really dictate the base of this game. Fabiano doesn't have a pawn break because he's overextended. He's not like in a dangerous way, but he can't break any pawns here. So now let's see what Fabiano can come up with. He decides to play bishop to a4. So bishop to a4 has a couple of ideas. First of all, like let's say white played the move h3. There was a tactic here. So there was knight takes e5. And the point is that if whatever you take with, the queen will take the bishop. So the first idea of bishop a4 is actually a defensive move. If knight takes e5, now you can just take like this, and the queen is hanging, and this, obviously, there's no bishop that can take. So that's the point. The other idea of bringing the bishop back is that the bishop will then come here and actually be aggressive. So first you play knight c3, we have a trade, and Fabiano's idea is to, at some point, do something like this. And in a perfect world, Fabiano will make Magnus make his light-squared bishop very passive. This is what he wants, because now that light-squared bishop for black sucks, and black is going to have to try to activate it this way, and white is going to try to fight on that side of the board. And the thing is, if black doesn't get f6, black has 2 garbage bishops. Let me tell you something right now. You have 2 bishops on the board, and they're both garbage. Something's probably bad, right? You have 3 basketball players on the court. 2 of them are bad. It's probably bad. So in this case, we definitely don't want a situation where black has 2 terrible bishops. So what does Magnus do? He brings the queen back to d8. He gets out of the way of rook b1, rook b1. He also defends his bishop, and now he is going to get a knight move. Now, again, in chess, it's very important to understand what the pawn play looks like. If black can clamp on white's queenside expansion with the pawn play, white is slowly going to run out of moves, right? So Fabi plays this, and we have knight a5. It looks like you can take on d5. You might be able to, but then we have bishop f5, so now this bishop comes alive. Let's say you come here, now you lose your c-pawn. Right, and so Magnus's pieces are super active, and in the future, this bishop will get active as well. Don't worry about it, but right now, obviously, it's a little bit of a problem. So we have this, takes, and now the queen comes right back to b6. Fabi rotates over with queen a2, and Magnus expands on the queen side with pawn to a5. Now, at this point, might be Fabiano's most pleasant position of the entire game, and he immediately should take advantage of it by playing queen a3 and c4 in some order. So queen a3 attacks the weak pawn on e7, and that's what he plays. Now, again, I have spoken about this already. If we see e6, positionally, Magnus is screwed. Because, again, f6 loses a lot of power, especially because you can even just try to go like this. And just so you understand, if you play f6 here, you might tactically lose this game in the long run, but you will strategically lose this game. So this knight is 10 times better than this bishop. Maybe 7 times, 8 times, hard to quantify. But that knight is a killer. And black has made really bad weaknesses by trying to escape with a dark squared bishop. So Magnus actually, despite this move looking extremely ugly and extremely passive, has to play it. It's the best move. It's actually the best move. So we're having a very deep positional strategic battle here between 2 extreme titans, if you will. Now, c4, why are you expanding? Because that's where you're stronger. It seems like all of your pieces are facing this way. This also doesn't take away anything from that side of the board. Takes, queen a6. However, in trying to expand, there are some responsibilities for your position. And now black will play b5, and let's not forget that at the end of the day, black has a passed a pawn, which may or may not decide the game for one of the sides. I don't know, right? Like we saw Fabiano have a game yesterday against Prague, which you obviously remember, and I will not shame you for forgetting, where the a-pawn proved decisive. So, maybe that pawn will be an asset for black. Maybe it'll be a liability. I don't know. So, c5. Now, the move c5 is really, it's nice and it's also not nice. It's nice because this bishop is really losing any future prospect of breaking out into this game. It's not going to break out. However, this bishop is now going to be a god, right? So you are giving your opponent the opportunity to have one very powerful bishop, but you're hoping to God, or gods, I don't know what Fabiano believes in, or spaghetti monsters, I don't know. But that is a meme, right? That was a meme back in the day. Anyway, you're just kind of relying on the fact that this bishop never comes alive. So, rook b1, a4, rook c1. The white position looks really nice. I think rook ec1 was a slight inaccuracy. Yeah, I remember here that white should play rook b4. White should actually leave the rook on e1 exactly where it is, and go for knight d2, and try to transfer this knight over here. Now, if black takes on f3, normally, traditional understanding is that this is a huge weakness. However, this bishop is dead. And it will never break out. Like, if black tries to play f6, you can even take, and you're gonna win this pawn. And then this bishop is still dead. It doesn't do anything, right? So, what Fabiano did here by moving this rook over, it becomes very obvious right now. The reason why moving this rook to c1 is bad because, dear viewer who is obviously paying attention, because the black queen can walk right into your territory. And now the black queen's like, what's up? You asked for me? And white's like, no, I really didn't. And that's actually one of the reasons the rook had to stay on e1. This kind of absurd infiltration move. And Fabi plays the move f3. Admittedly, I guess he didn't want the queen to end up on g4. So, for example, like, I mean, h3 will probably lead to exactly what happens in this game anyway, but I'm not sure what he didn't, maybe he just, I don't know, maybe there was some concrete idea behind f3, like blocking out this bishop in the long run, or trying to put the knight on e4, but now Magnus kind of shows why this queen is so strong here, and he takes on d4. A move that looks impossible. Now, oftentimes, I like to say this in chess, oftentimes if a move is impossible, looks impossible, but it turns out to be good, you're in trouble. He sacks the rook for a pawn and wins the knight. So Magnus has given up a rook for a knight and a pawn, and he thinks he's better here, obviously. So what the hell do you do here? Well, again, traditional knowledge says you should trade queens because you're up material. You should try to maybe get rid of this pawn by sacking the rook back. Maybe this b pawn will be a liability, and maybe we are going to keep this bishop out of the game for some time. So rook d1, we chase the queen out, and we threaten to trade queens. All right, we're threatening to trade queens, right? And Magnus is like, okay. Now Fabiano here must have been like, yo, did this bozo just trade queens with me? For real? Because the thing is, he went for it and lost his other pawn. So now it's not a bishop and a pawn for a rook. It's a bishop and 2 pawns for a rook. And Fabi didn't have to do this, but he was going to lose this pawn. Because, look, if he tried to hang on to it, this pawn can now be a really big problem. If you take, you lose your bishop. If you play rook to a1, just thinking you're winning, I play rook d8. And you just have too many problems to deal with here. Maybe not rook d8, maybe even rook a8. I just stubbornly defend my pawn and push it to a2. Like, something like this. I mean, this is just never... you see? You just... That damn outside pass pawn. So, bishop c3, he goes for this. And now Magnus reroutes the bishop back to e7 to pressure c5. Brings in the rook and starts building up a little pawn wall. So now Magnus has 2 pass pawns. The bishop on c6, the $1 million bishop that we gave to black, right? Rook f8, king e1, rook f5. And how is Magnus actually going to win this game? How is he going to prove to us he's winning here? Okay, he gives a check, he forces the pawn out. Remember a long time ago, we talked about one bishop is good and one bishop is bad? Yeah, now both bishops are good, so... and now the rook is also good. And, yeah, I mean, you got too many weaknesses. It's actually kind of fascinating how easy Magnus made this look. Look at this move. Putting the rook on a square where he will trade, and that pawn also becomes a passer deeper into the position. And Magnus won right here. Fabio resigned. Fabio resigned because he has nothing. Like, he just can't do anything. For instance, let's just h3, king e6, king, it doesn't matter. I mean, it really makes no difference. I can go king d5 and take on c5, and this endgame is completely winning for black. You have 3 passed pawns against the rook. You know what the craziest thing about this is? When Magnus played rook takes d4, Fabi got nothing. Like, watch the white pieces. They didn't move. I mean, they're moving. They're literally moving, but they made almost no progress at all. Nothing. They couldn't do it. They were just moving in circles, it felt like, right? And he wins after bishop d4. So, it just makes it look completely effortless. Completely effortless. Just strategic genius. I don't even know what to say. Like, sometimes we are so unimpressed. We're just like, oh yeah, he won. Cool. We don't know how he did it, but he made it look really simple. I don't know. It's just mind-blowing. Just completely mind-blowing that, you know, these two have battled in these kind of strategic games so many times, and all you need to give is Magnus is just a slightly unique pawn structure like this with some degree of imbalance. He'll win it. He'll win it with white, black, green, red, purple. Doesn't matter. So Magnus actually clinches first place with this victory. So congrats to him. Oh my gosh, stick around for some of these games. Actually, this is the next game that I would like to show you. This game was fun. So even though there's no Magnus here, you're gonna want to watch because something really funny happened here. So we know that yesterday Shanklin took an early draw and he apologized for it on Twitter. We know that Sergey's just been wilding on Twitter. Hashtag say no to 2900. So these two are playing and we have a Nimso Indian and we have F3, the Kmok. That's not how you say it, but it's KMOCH variation, trying to play e4. Black strikes at the center with c5, d5, b5. Wild line where there is just insane tactics all over. e4 now. White builds this massive wall in the center, but black is already trying to attack it. Black here can take, castle, d6. Black chooses d6, bishop d2 blocking this pin, and a6. And the point of a6 is like, well, why are you defending this? You are ready to give it up. That's because if takes, takes on d5. And when this happens, black is more than ready to just take back on b5. And the point is that, like, if you go this entire distance, the queen side is a violent place for the black army, and I mean, white is completely undeveloped. So black plays a6 to kind of temporarily stabilize this side of the board, and white just attacks it right away with the move a4. Shankland here is looking to go into a very forcing variation. The forcing variation is pawn takes c4, bishop c4, knight d7. Now, this has been seen a handful of times, maybe 5 times, and clearly Shankland was prepared. The funny thing is that if you look at this position in the database, it was played by Radoslav Wojtaszek, who is a Polish grandmaster, and then it was played by Radoslav Wojtaszek's wife, Alina Kaszlinskaya, which is just very funny. So husband and wife preparation. You know, if Lucy and I ever play in a chess tournament together, I'm going to give her some nasty prep to detonate on fellow 1100s. So de6, and white wins a pawn in this line, but because white is really negating development, black gets to play this move knight e5 and threaten some potentially dirty stuff over here. So we have bishop c8, queen c8, bishop f4. So far the players are following all those games. And if black plays in the right way, black will equalize and the game will most likely end in a draw. So white has to develop to h3, because if white develops to e2, which looks much more natural, queen c5 and black is winning. Winning! How? Can't castle anymore. And actually, white is stuck. So, for example, if white plays, I don't know, queen c2, long castles is killing. If you don't allow the white king to castle at all, you just win the game. It's incredible. Queen c5 and long castle here is winning for black. So, you have to know the prep. Knight h3 is the best move to try to come back, cover the diagonal, and do this. Now, at this point, the only games in the database have ever gone queen c5. And here, Karyakin began to think. And here, Nepomniachtchi, who you know played in the World Championship match and had Karyakin on his team, tweeted. And he tweeted and he said, I wonder if Sam is going to apologize again on Twitter for playing this line, which is known to be very forcing, if Karyakin can find some accurate moves. That is what he said. He said, I wonder if Shankland is going to apologize for going into this variation if this game ends in a draw, and if Sergey knows his stuff. Okay, a little bit of shade there, a little bit of banter. Sergey plays bishop c5. So bishop c5 has never been seen before, but it's the same idea, obviously. You want to cover this, and you want to play rook b8, and now white is going to play, like, these 3 moves. White is going to just try to be a pawn up, consolidate, and, rook b8, and we're going to see what we can do. So knight f2. At this point, though, it's very obvious why it's queen c5 and not bishop c5. You say, Levy, I don't understand. What the hell is the difference between queen c5 and bishop to c5? Well, the point is that the queen on e3 is extremely scary. That is actually why you want the queen on c5. That is the point. The queen arrives on c5 and can really do some damage. Also, if you play queen to e2 to prevent queen to e3, this is what black is oftentimes aiming for. And black will try to play rook d4 and rook d8. It's just very scary. All of the black pieces are super active. But when the bishop is on c5, you don't quite get the same thing. So now Sergey was probably like, well, queen b7 looks very natural. I mean, I'm supposed to be pressuring the white position, right? But actually, at this point, the computer is already thinking that black should just play, like, with the knight and castle. So the computer thinks that black should go for a position like this, where white covers up from this assault and is, like, just hoping for the best. It's a very scary position, all those rooks, bishops. But he plays queen b7. Queen b7 is a major inaccuracy, and now white is winning. White is winning if white takes on c4. And there are 2 insane lines here. This actually does become the game. But queen takes c4. If takes, you have this, queen b2. And now the best move for white is to go like this. I'm not joking. And now the best move for white is to go like this. This is some absolutely gangster stuff. Point is that if you take and leave the king cut off, you lose. Queen c6, king f7, queen c7 check. And if you bring your king to g6, oops! And you lose your queen. And if you don't bring your king, I will force your king there or you'll get mated. So, and if you go to the back rank, I take your rook with check. So you can't do this. You cannot allow the king to go out there because your king is actually the one that's weaker. So your king is weaker. But probably Shanklin didn't like this very much. He did not like the prospect of bringing his king out to h4. It's very easy for me to sit here like a bozo with my engine. Instead, he castled. And we actually got a very similar line as we could have gotten in the game, which is instead of taking on f2, you take on b2. So there could have been queen c4, queen b2, same idea. And believe it or not, he gave him a piece. He gave Sergei a piece. And for the second time in this game, you see the situation of if a guy is left with his king in the center of the board, it doesn't matter if he's up material. Doesn't matter that Sergei is up a piece here, because his pieces are all targets for the white army. Queen e6, rook b1. How does Sergei defend the position? So he plays queen b3. That is the best move. You should try to trade queens, and white obviously does not want to trade queens. White plays queen c7, threatening boop, boop, boop. The rook's not hanging, but the idea is rook b1, and the bishop is still hanging. How does black defend all this? Almost impossible. Queen b6 is still the best move, because if queen takes g7, you now have this, and this is protected, the knight. So he has to go like this, but now knight d5. And the best move for Sergei is to play rook e8 and go into a position where he sacks the queen. There's this queen hanging, and we get a position like this, where white has a rook and 2 pawns for bishop knight, and maybe some queenside pressure for the long run. Instead of that, Sergei takes the knight. Check here, check back here, rook c1. Rook c7 is coming. Sergei resigns. Yeah. Why did he resign? Why didn't he continue the game with something like rook c8? Takes, queen f5, you lose the rook. And he did not play something like rook b7, disallowing rook c7, because check. And king e7. Oh, I apologize. I checked in the wrong direction. Queen d5. Queen d5. King e7, rook c6. He loses. He loses the game. There's check and you bring the rook. The game is over. Like, you just cannot prevent getting assaulted. Queen e6, rook c8. You just lose. Insane. Completely insane. And Nepo jinxed him. He jinxed Karyakin. Karyakin's just constantly involved in some sort of insane stuff. And this just shows you how crazy chess is. It all hangs on a knife's edge. There's some games that don't hang on a knife's edge. There are some games that do. This one hung on a knife's edge. Black had to know 20 moves of preparation. He knew 19. He lost. And, you know, some people don't like that. I see some people in the comments like, it's so depressing that chess is like that. Yes, but you also have to credit the guy that did his homework and knows his stuff. So, you know. All right. Let's go to the next game. I wanted to show you this game as well. This is between Vidit Gujarati and Shahryar Mamedyarov. This one is an interesting opening battle as well. This one was an Italian. And actually a weird Italian. A very weird Italian. So, bishop b6 voluntarily retreating here from the queenside expansion. This was seen in the game Alexienko Caruana from, very good, the continuation of the candidates tournament in Yekaterinburg, Russia in 2021. A very important tournament to determine who would play against Magnus in the last World Championship match. And here's the point. Black leaves the center of the board with the knight to rotate over to g6, also to potentially build for d5. And if white expands in the center with d4, black says, psych, I'm going right back. And the point is that now you put pressure on d4. My monitor just turned green. What the heck? My monitor's been doing that recently. I don't know, the HDMI is bugging out, or like I'm hitting it with my foot or something. I don't know. But I have to, I'm just sharing this with you. I don't know why, but it's like my therapy here. So the knight goes back to c6 to pressure, and now white has to decide what to do in the middle. If white plays d5, this is actually not really what white wants at all. You don't really want to close the center, because black can just attack you in the future. You kind of get a King's Indian structure, potentially. So instead of that, white plays a4, and black is the one to actually do some stuff in the center here with takes and takes. And the computer actually prefers this position for white. It likes the expansion on the queen side. It likes knight b3 and knight c5, or knight e4 and knight c5 potentially. It thinks that this isolated pawn position is better for white. It likes the open lines, but now Vidit has to outplay Mamedyarov. Let's see if he's able to do so. Plays b3. Point of b3, is that obviously you have a little bit more stability on the queen side, and maybe you want to play bishop a3 in the future. Also, if black takes on d4 with the knight, which looks like you just do this, and this rook got no moves. You play rook e8, I can play takes. That's a free knight, and there's also a5 trapping this bishop. Like, bishop takes a5, knight takes d4. I don't know, weird stuff. So, yeah, that was Vidit's idea. Obviously, Mamedyarov did not hang a piece on move 14. Instead, he played bishop e6, knight e4, and we are obviously going to c5. So Vidit's playing very logically, building everything up. He wants to play knight c5. He also wants to play knight e5. So he wants his horses are jumping in the middle. c6. It seems like Mamedyarov's game plan here is slightly off from what's necessary. I mean, it seems like Vidit's moves are flowing much more naturally, right? Knight e4, knight e5, bishop b2, queen f3. You can almost smell his next move is to play rook d1. But f6 is a very, very, very provocative move, and Vidit has to call the bluff here. Vidit has to go knight g4. It has to say, Mamedyarov, boss, what the hell is this? I mean, dude, do you even watch Ben Feingold? Ben Feingold says never to play that move. For example, it looks like f5 is a fork, right? But then this... If you take with the knight, e6 falls, right? So, if you take with the pawn, you might as well resign. I mean, I take, but you have to calculate all this out. Rook takes e6, check, here, checkmate. I mean, you just get mated. Bishop is still on a3. So, knight g4 is what you have to go for. You have to attack the integrity of the black king because that just looks so ugly. The game is far from over. This bishop can still be taken. The game is far from over, but you have to go knight g4. Vidit plays knight back to d3. Still not a bad move. Positionally, white is doing very well, because white is going to jump to c5. I mean, you can't put 3 pawns on dark squares in front of a king. That's just, you're asking for trouble. This bishop is going to get hunted to death now, right? So bishop f7, understandably, he hides it. Vidit plays rook e2, just trying to bring his rooks. Okay, now, Vidit has everything. All his pieces are out. They're on the e-file, right? He's ready for this trade to kick the knight out of the middle. Maybe bishop will come back to c1, hitting h6. It does right now. Bishop d2, he forces the trade. Seems like everything he's doing is great. I mean, Schach is reduced to a rectangle, okay? There's 8 ranks on a chessboard. If you're playing on 3 of them, you're doing something wrong, right? So, Vidit's got a great position. Now, he's got to make something happen. He takes on h6. Oh, Vidit, oh my goodness. If pawn takes h6, knight f6, and the rook's bulldoze, and the game is over. But of course, Schach sees that coming. Schach has 2 options here. He can take on d4, and the queen pressures everybody, or he can play knight g6. So the computer was actually saying knight g6 is the best move, bishop g7, and to play like this, to play knight g3. Yeah, I mean, knight h5, knight f5, crazy. It thinks the white attack is very strong here. It doesn't believe in the integrity of the black cube defense here. But Schach plays queen takes d4, which is an equally attractive move. Now, the best move here for white, believe it or not, is to take the foot off the gas and come back. And the point is that this bishop must be traded. It will be traded whether you like it or not. And this knight will now get to f4. And this rook actually is very stuck. So rook e5. Now queen g4 threatens knight f6. If you play pawn to f5 in this position, check. King there, there's mate. So you have to go to f8. And now kabam. And queen takes d4. Insane. I mean, the knights are so savage here for white, and they have been the whole game. So Vidit's got to play this bishop f4 idea and jump in there with the knights. But he plays queen g4 first, setting up the idea, I guess, of some knight f6 in the future, threatening mate. And I suppose that he calculated, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe he calculated knight g6 and then knight f6, and then everything falls apart. He must have thought he was completely winning, because queen g4 either wins the game immediately or loses on the spot. And it loses on the spot, which is just f5. And that's heartbreaking. Vidit, the fork here covers mate. So the difference between these 2 variations is that in the other one, there is a rook blocking the diagonal. That is the difference. And it's like a cold bucket of water on the head. And it's just the worst feeling ever, because Vidit was playing an incredible game, and now he's just going to lose a piece. There's nothing that he can do here. He has to take, and he obviously tries to play a little bit more, but if you count the pieces, Black has 3 of them and white has 2. And it's really bad also because if it was 2 bishops versus 2 knights, at least maybe you can play, but the bishops are so much stronger, and all Schach has to do is trade. And Vidit plays a little bit more, but Schach consolidates, he gets the rook in, and very nice finish. If you take bishop g3 and everything dies, and Vidit resigns. And I mean, you have to feel for Vidit. I mean, you can cheer for Schach, absolutely, but I feel for Vidit. Vidit's a good dude. And, you know, the reason I'm cheering for Vidit is because I don't know his highest rating ever. I believe it's like 2730. And he had such a good start in this event. The loss to Prague, but then bouncing back and drawing Magnus in a long game, in a hard-fought game. I want him to break into 2740, 2750, 2760. I want to see that next crop of the mid-20-year-olds, the 28, 29-year-old GMs, and the younger GMs as well, into the 2700s. That's me personally. I'm biased. I'm cheering for Vidit, and that sucks. And credit to Schach for always bringing exciting and interesting chess, and in the complications, he got the victory, and that's life. And the final game that I have for you is from the Challenger section. This is a super, super imbalanced game. And some of you might not even be sticking around. You're like, I already saw, well, this was a really cool game. So, watch. So, we've got another strong player from India, Ganguly, who helped Vishy Anand win some world championships. And we have Erwin Lamy, who is Dutch and worked with Anish Giri. We have a Joko Pianissimo, but not quite. So we have knight c3 again, and knight a4. So white goes for the bishop of black. Now, a little bit of time passes here, and white actually doesn't take right away because he's not forced. He expands on the queen side, then he takes, and then he takes, and he plays c4. So very close structure. 8 pawns per player. You don't let black play for d5. But if you look at the move c4, something might stand out to you here. And it's the move knight takes b4. For example, white didn't have to play c4. He could have done this, but then probably he didn't like that black could get b5. And c4 is impossible at that point because of the very simple pawn loss in the middle. So he must have gone for c4 thinking that, okay, black will do something. I will go here and I will be very happy. And if this, obviously I'm not stupid. I'm not going to go for this. Instead, I will sack my bishop. So if pawn takes h6, a takes b4, and I'm very happy because I have more space and black's king is wide open. So that happened. And here, Erwin Lemy said, take my knight. What? Well, if I take your knight, there's this. I'm just down a pawn, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go knight g5. And you're going to have to move your rook because I'm threatening your rook. Rook e8, take, queen d3. Maybe f4. Maybe queen g3. And after knight g5, black said, no, you can actually have my rook. What? And now, those of you that stuck around and didn't leave are going to be treated to a masterclass. Okay, so obviously the bishop on h6 is still hanging. We have to move it. Knight takes e4. The count is knight and 2 pawns for a rook. And obviously it's knights versus bishop. Now, knights are good in 2 types of situations. Knights are good in close positions. This is a more open position, but it's clumped. And the thing is that if knights can tie together, like on c5 like this, and they can't be removed by pawns, they're so strong and they're so annoying. And the black position is very clumped. So that means that knights operate really better with like a warship of pawns. So we have knight back to f6, voluntarily giving up b7. I mean, you could have gone to c5. I don't know why he didn't like this. Maybe he didn't like, again, I just mentioned this. Knights like to stay solid. They don't like to deal with stuff like f4 because, you know, if you leave just one knight, that's not gonna handle an attack very well. Knights work very well in pairs, like cats. You ever go to an adoption center, bonded pair? You came in wanting 1, but you leave with 2, right? So, or 4, I don't know. We might get a cat soon. So knight f6, queen takes b7, rook a4. And he's completely fine giving away the pawn on b7 because the pawn, and trading queens, I might say. Trading queens because the pawn on b7 doesn't change the clump. See, if the c7 pawn was lost, look what happens. d6, b6, the game is over. The c7 pawn is lost. If this pawn is lost, rook gets in on the b file. But that pawn didn't do anything. Sorry, no disrespect to the b7 pawn, but you're trash and useless and meaningless. Unlike you, you are amazing, no matter how down you ever seem to feel. Rook goes back to a8, and the knights begin doing their dance, and here come the pawns. The knight travels to c5. Now this trade doesn't mean anything, because there's no attack by white with the queen trade. And yeah, black moves the knight to a5. c4 is a liability. Rook c1, but how is black going to break through? Black is going to permanently increase the pressure, at some point bringing the king, at some point pressuring on the h-file, at some point breaking with something in the middle. But Ganguly makes it a bit more exciting. He actually tries to open up on the h-file and get in. But I did mention a moment ago that it's black who will decide when this game opens up, and he plays e4. That just looks like a free pawn. And for a very brief moment it is. But look at this. 4 isolated pawn islands. A strategic catastrophe. No pun intended. Catastrophe? Oh my god, I should go to prison for making that pun. Knight e5, knight g5, and I mean, have you ever seen something so vicious? These knights are unbelievable. I mean, they're like 2 Rottweilers. Knight, yeah, take the pawn over there, right? You're trying to break. Knight takes g4. Knight goes back to e5. Now that knight. I mean, it's like 2 dudes are beating you up and punching you on each side of your face. How many analogies have I made in this video? I don't know, but it's like 20% of the reason you watch anyway. You never know what's coming. Now the knight goes back. They just take the pawns. They just boop, 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 boop. Knight goes back to g. Now this knight comes forward. And you're obviously going to win this game by pushing your f-pawn. Rook c5, making sure that you don't hang the pawn on c7. Rook into f3, rook to e3, knight to e4 again. And you have rook 2 knights, but the person that's going to decide this game is the king. The king moves to f5, and you resign. And look at this sword. Look at this black sword. It's like the point right here, and then you have like these 2 pieces. Very aesthetic little position, and beautiful game by Erwin. Beautiful game. And if you had the patience to stick around 36 minutes, folks, I just want to summarize very quickly that Magnus Carlsen has once won again the Tata Steel. It's his 8th victory. He is like the Golden State Warriors at this point, where we must pretend that he won't win a tournament beforehand. He ends the event very close to 28-70. And Arjun Erigaisi has won this tournament for like 4 rounds now. But if you didn't know that, Arjun from India has won the tournament. He's a beast. That means he will play in the Masters section next year. And we will probably still do a final round recap if the games so wish. Let me know if you want a final round recap. Let me know if you don't want one. And yeah, I will see you in tomorrow's video. Get out of here.